Championship is brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. In association with Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.
Hello and welcome on Eurosport. This is the half-hour morning warm-up from Canada, the circuit Jules Villeneuve on the Ile de Notre Dame, and it's 3:30 if you're on the continent, 2:30 if you're in the UK, and it's 9:30 here in Canada. First man out on the circuit, Carl Wendlinger, and John, it's a glorious morning. I think it's the hottest morning we've had so far.
Thank you, Alan, and yes, as we're speaking, the sun is getting higher in the sky, and it certainly is getting a lot warmer very quickly indeed. In fact, an hour ago, I thought we were going to have a fairly chill afternoon, but the weather has suddenly changed, and well, there you can see on your screen, not a cloud in the sky, and to where we're talking to you from in the commentary position, the sun is very hot indeed. And this race this afternoon, 2 o'clock in Montreal, will be a very hard race, physically very demanding. It'll be also very, very hard on the cars, first of all in terms of fuel consumption, but secondly on the mechanical reliability. Brakes, transmissions, all take a punishing. And this is probably one of the most difficult races in the calendar. I think for some teams they consider it the most difficult.
Carl Wendlinger straight back in. As for that matter, probably everybody else that's gone out on the circuit coming straight back into the pits for a last check. Now we've got with us another guest. I think it's the third one of the weekend. Robin Hurt, technical director of the LaRousse team. Robin, what do you do on the Sunday morning?
The first thing is what you've seen happens now. We do one lap just to check the new engine, because most of the teams will have new engines in for the race. The second thing, we'll go out and check our setup on genuine full tanks, although to be fair, most will have done that on Saturday. And then the third thing is any odds and ends that crop up.
Well, the man that starts from his 7th pole position this year, his 27th pole position, is Alain Prost, and there the other front row driver, Damon Hill. John, the Williams team has been, well, overwhelming competitive, I think is the word.
They have indeed, and in fact Alain Prost has created a new record for consecutive pole positions in one season. This is his 7th consecutive out of 7 Grand Prix, and in reality I have to say, unless something unforeseen happens, Alain Prost should go on and set a new record at every Grand Prix. And looking at young man Rubens Barrichello, who improved, one of the few people to have improved in Saturday's qualifying session. The day was glorious, but the track conditions generally appeared to be slightly slower. Certainly nobody in the top 8 improved. It was the middle order and the lower order of the grid that were the ones that managed to reshuffle themselves a little bit. But this man, Ayrton Senna, was so unhappy after qualifying on Saturday afternoon that he virtually was speechless or wordless, and those words that he did manage to utter were not repeatable. And he, I think, had a lot of intense thinking and work with his engineers to try and understand why his McLaren didn't work. So Robin, you worked closely with your two drivers, Filipe Alliot and Eric Comas. Well, there looks Michael Andretti in problems already, very slowly indeed. But going back to your two drivers, Robin, did you have problems here over the 2 days of qualifying, or just simply a fairly normal Grand Prix?
Fairly normal, but the difference is that the circuit has a character which is, yeah, I'd say unique in all the Formula One circuits, in that it's effectively a couple of drag strips joined by the odd slow corner. And therefore, and I think this is the root of Senna's problem, two things don't matter. One is the aerodynamics of the car, and I think the aerodynamics on that car with the Active are very good. And secondly, to be candid, the driver is not of supreme importance, and there we've got certainly the best driver in the world, perhaps the best has ever been, and his skill is of relative unimportance this weekend.
Where would a team like McLaren, with all their expertise, experience and finance, where would they go wrong then? I mean, it's such a, not a simple exercise, but apparently so. where would they have gone wrong?
I don't think they necessarily have gone wrong. I mean, one could make all sorts of one-liners about choosing the engine and so on like that, but that's unfair. But when you see the straight line speeds and you see 4 Renaults, 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to realise that the engine is of supreme importance here.
The circuit also has had, by tradition, a very low grip surface. A car tends to slide around an awful lot. And we've seen different teams and cars looking here at Riccardo Patrese. Visually, that car appears to have a fairly small amount of rear wing. Other teams and cars are running with a lot more rear wing. So in reality, you think that the amount of wing in effect is not that critical here.
It's very strange. On the flight out, we were looking at last year's times, and we saw that only 4 people went faster on the second day, which is very unusual on a road circuit, because normally the circuit cleans up. Now, and the same pretty much happened this year. The only guy really to make an improvement of the people who are truly good was Barrichello, and that was very impressive. I think there are 2 factors. One, it was a bit hotter, but secondly, on this race, they have all sorts of other races. They have 3 saloon car races, 2 other single-seater races. And I think there's a change of grip, basic grip on the circuit, which is not, on the one hand you get it cleaner, on the other hand you get all this funny rubber that the Formula 1 rubber is not used to working with, and it just, the overall effect is a lack of grip.
Well, in a few hours' time, the Grand Prix will be commencing, and one of the significant factors here in Montreal is fuel consumption. Now, the Ford V8 HB and Senna's car, and the Benettons of Michael Schumacher and Riccardo Patrese, are by tradition more frugal on their fuel than the more powerful V10s and V12s. Now, we don't know how much fuel, for example, Prost or Damon Hill will have to carry, but you do know how much fuel you've got to carry for your V12 Lamborghini engine. How much disadvantage would you say your V12 engine has simply having to carry more fuel over a V8?
Well, again, being simplistic, the more cylinders you have, the more fuel you're going to carry. And again, if I appeared to criticise the Cosworth, it wasn't meant as a fundamental criticism of the engine. It's just that the strengths of the Cosworth are not brought out here, but they will come out in the race, particularly in low fuel consumption.
We're going to continue with the warm-up after the break here on Eurosport.
The Ford Escort has won again at the Acropolis Rally. The Ford Escort. We race. You get the result.
Pioneer Multiplay Car CD System. Eurosport Live.
Welcome back here on Eurosport for the morning warm-up. Quickest driver on the circuit at the moment, Michael Schumacher on the 1:26.190. Then it's Damon Hill, a couple of cents away, Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger, but it's all changed because Jean Alesi comes fast, start-finish, and is now the fastest driver. We'll have straight-in times all through this session, and for the moment we haven't seen any major dramas, although Michael Andretti did try to come back to the pits very slowly indeed.
Well, it looked to me like Michael Andretti had a major problem, and I doubt he did get back to the pits, because at the furthest point from the pits, that's over at the East Hairpin, he was very, very slow, and well, I suspect that he somewhere or other stopped on the circuit. We did see Michael Schumacher pulling off one of his tear-offs. And now back out to the back of the circuit. And this is the second fastest part coming down under the bridge. Cars reaching somewhere in the region of 180 miles an hour before they brake heavily down into second gear. Well, that's one of the numerous left, rights, and really confirming what Robin Herd has been telling us, that the circuit is little more than a drag strip interconnected by a sequence of very slow right-left chicanes. Damon Hill coming through the final one before he goes down to that East Hairpin bend, and Damon, in the space of a lap, has gone from being second quickest to fifth. But I'm sure when he completes this lap, he'll be probably, well, certainly up into the top two again. Currently, the quickest man after 6 laps is Ayrton Senna. So something has happened overnight in the McLaren team for them to have found a little bit more competitive performance, and maybe gone back to fundamentals, gone back to basics. Sometimes, in my experience, that the setup that you come with to a Grand Prix turns out to be the right one after all, but you go round in this enormous circle of discovery to find out that what you had initially, in fact, was absolutely spot on.
So Damon Hill now fastest in this session on a 1:25 and a little bit, 0:18. Ayrton Senna being put back to second. In his third currently, JJ Leto. JJ, who did not have a happy time in Monaco. He says things are a bit better, but as we said over the weekend, the Sauber team is it's basically 2 teams at the moment. There's Carl Wendlinger, he's got the support of all the Swiss, and you've got the foreigners, which is JJ Leto and his engineers, who are not from either Germany, Austria or Switzerland, and they don't work together anymore, John.
Well, I think it's a great shame. We talked about this yesterday, and your team has to be a team, and Robin, you have worked in a number of teams in your Grand Prix history, and you can say how important it is, because, well, you've got to work as a team.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And, you know, frankly, I think you'd give a better answer than I would. You know how when you and Nicky were together, I know how much you benefit from working with each other. The moment you get a split in a team, you don't just get half the information, you get a quarter, because both drivers can spark ideas of each other. But I can bring back to your memory ideas that you put to Nicky and Nicky spark back to you, both of you as a result.
I think that's really very much a product of a relationship between the 2 drivers, and when you've got 2 French drivers, and you've worked with, in your history of motor racing, lots of young drivers as well as very experienced drivers, Ronnie Peterson and many, many others. How do you cope with 2 let's say, UK or British drivers, first of all from the technology and the language of technology, but also the different personalities of each nationality?
In this instance, we're very lucky, because quite deliberately at the beginning of the season, we got together and went through the question you posed of working together and operating as a team. The 2 drivers do work together. They're very different personalities, which helps. And the whole aspect is to get everybody, from the engineers to the mechanics to the drivers, to work together as a team. And this weekend, both drivers have helped each other an awful lot.
Well, as we're looking at the Tag Heuer Olivetti computer in front of us, Eric Comas is 9th quickest currently, Philippe Alliot in 17th. But in reality, how important is this morning's warm-up? How important are the times? I mean, do they ultimately relate to the Grand Prix itself, or is it just somewhat of an information-gathering exercise?
To a certain degree, they relate to the race, but each team tends to approach the warm-up in a different way. Some go out and out to post a fast time for psychological benefit. Others don't care a damn about that and just seek to gain technical benefit. And, you know, that obviously influences the times you see.
Well, we saw, rather unfortunately for Alessandro Zanardi, he was like Michael Andretti a few minutes earlier, coming into or back towards the pits very slowly indeed. And if you go back to Saturday afternoon, Allard, in fact, that incident we saw with Zanardi does appear to have been a mechanical problem of some sort. We did suspect it could have been, but, well, we weren't sure, but something with the suspension went wrong. And just at this point here, and he ended up in that very hard concrete wall.
And he did say he did hit it pretty hard. He felt as though it was a pretty hard knock. Damon Hill is the fastest man on the circuit. He's done 8 laps, and his current time is a couple the whole second faster has now gone Alain Prost. Prost is on a 1:23.2, then Hill on a 1:24.3. Schumacher, Senna, Alesi, JJ Leto back in 6th. Riccardo Patrese 7th. Rubens Barrichello in 8th. Johnny Herbert 9th. And the first off the LaRousse Lamborghinis, Eric Gomez is in 10th position. And we're watching Ukio Katayama, who is a couple of seconds off the pace. And Ukio did say he damaged the rear wing yesterday. He was right this time, I think, John.
I think, yes, he was right, but he also was correct in saying that he didn't damage the rear of the car. On Friday, when he went off very early in the qualifying session, he came back to the pits and said, oh, so there we see Ukio live doing something he's been doing every day so far this Grand Prix. This time, fortunately, no contact for the Tyrrell engineers. And Ukio on Friday radioed through, said, no problem, guys, just one broken front wing. Somehow, and this is a fact that sometimes racing drivers are guilty of, they fail to see the serious damage. They just tell you about the, let's say, superficial damage. Robin, how do you cope with drivers who are somewhat economical with their eyesight when they are caught bang to rights?
I have to say, John, that maybe I've been lucky. I've had pretty honest drivers. They haven't come into that. I mean, occasionally you do get it when I think drivers actually get quite stunned and they're not too sure what's happened, and what they say in that moment of shock is, as you say, not necessarily economical with the truth, but not accurate.
Well, Alain Prost is the fastest man still, 1:23.200. Then Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill and Ayrton Senna. That's the situation. We're going to take a short commercial break and we're back after that.
Nobody learns more about making winning Formula One tires than Goodyear. That learning continuously changes the way we design the tires you drive. All Goodyear Eagle high-performance tires rely on our Formula One technology to give better performance, more stability, more traction wherever life takes you. We design tires for the world's most demanding drivers. Goodyear, a change for the better.
BP's research and testing tends to leave an impression on most visitors.
Fourth floor aviation fuel research. Seventh floor motorsport fuel testing.
And we put this research to use in a very practical place. Your local BP station.
Pizza for Ted King? Top floor.
Top floor space research.
BP, on the move.
Als mich die DEKRA-Leute gefragt haben, ob ich einen Film für sie mache, da habe ich gesagt, warum? Als mich die DEKRA-Leute gefragt haben, ob ich mit meinen Ingenieuren zufrieden wäre, da habe ich gesagt, ja, sehr. Und als die DEKRA-Leute mir dann gezeigt haben, dass sie all die Autos mit der gleichen Sorgfalt checken, wie es meine Techniker tun, da habe ich gesagt, hey, das sollten Sie mal all den Autofahrern sagen. Die DEKRA, geprüft und für gut befunden.
Eurosport Live.
11 minutes to go on this Sunday morning warm-up here in Canada, and Alain Prost was done 7 laps and he's still easily the fastest man on the circuit. And John, if Alain gets a good start this afternoon, basically the race will be run, wouldn't it?
I mean, Alain Prost is in the kind of position he really enjoys most, that is in way more dominant than his opposition. He's currently 1 second quicker than Michael Schumacher, who we're in car with at this moment. And all he has to do is take a little bit more time than he did in Monte Carlo 3 weeks ago, get into the first corner first, and then he will be able to control the Grand Prix. Now, it's easy to say that the race, therefore, is his by the first corner. There are an awful lot of things that can go wrong, and one of the difficulties here in Canada is overtaking the back markers. You tend to get cars bunching together, and those cars are very often involved in their own races. Now, I've often been critical of people being lapped not paying attention in their mirrors to the leading cars coming through. But for example, here, this is the East Hairpin. This is the most popular place to pass. Alain Prost is not the most assertive or forceful overtaker in the business, and he has got to be very careful when he does pick and choose where he's going to pass. He's got to make those cars ahead of him aware he is coming through, but as importantly, they've got to see him there as well, and there's got to be cooperation. And if you've got a chain of 7 or 8 cars, which is what we had here last year for the lead of this Grand Prix, well, there are little danger points all around the circuit. So Alain will have to be on his toes throughout the entire 69 laps of this Grand Prix.
Riccardo Patrese has gone to 4th fastest, and John, I'm really happy to say Riccardo's again being very close to teammate Michael Schumacher and feeling very confident indeed. As we said, Alain Prost is a very relaxed man. Also Martin Brundle in the top 10 again. Martin yesterday after qualifying, well, he's in 6th position now, was very relaxed. He said the tactics are basically going to be exactly the same as last year. Johnny Herbert is in 9th, and I think that's very good news for the Lotus team because they were off the pace yesterday and they're back on form in full tank configuration.
Allard, you know, one of the things I experienced in my days as Grand Prix driver is that a lot of the cars in a low tank configuration, a qualifying configuration, somehow don't put the energy into the tires to get the grip, to go quickly, to get, you know, whatever. And I think that Lotus are one of those teams. And Robin, you're an engineer. In qualifying, how do you get tire temperature, therefore grip, therefore the ability to open the throttle and go quickly? How do you set about that with your two drivers?
Normally, the majority of that is done for us by Goodyear, and they choose a compound that's going to be appropriate to the circuit to give the tire temperature. What you get during the day, and what we've seen here, is a great difference in temperature between the morning and the afternoon, and so a difference in tire temperatures between the morning and the afternoon. And so some cars that were quick in the morning, relatively slower in the afternoon, some are slower in the morning and relatively faster in the afternoon. And obviously one of the critical factors on this is the amount of downforce. And as we were discussing and you alluded to earlier on, John, there's quite a difference in the levels of downforce that people have chosen for the race. And this is quite unusual because normally the amount of downforce is pretty clear-cut for your optimum lap time. Here it's all over the place.
But let's take an example of say, Lotus. On Saturday morning, they appeared to have found a good balance. They had a good grip. The drivers were up. They were happy. You could see the confidence in their eyes. Come the afternoon, when you've got only 12 laps, not 23 laps, you've got only 2 sets of tyres. Most people do choose to go out on fresh tyres, in other words, new tyres. And mysteriously, all that grip that you had 2 hours earlier has evaporated. Where does it go to?
Again, funny enough, this occurs much more in American racing, in kart racing. Someone said this morning, maybe perceptively, that the American tarmac is different from British tarmac, and I don't think that should necessarily be thrown out as being stupid. But again, it's fundamentally the track condition, the temperature of the track and the amount of rubber that's on the track and oil and this, that and the other. And certainly on oval racing, all you're trying to do for most of the weekend is try and keep up with the track, to tune your car to the track. I mean, getting an oval car to work pretty well on a good track is quite simple. But as the track changes and the grip changes, you've got to follow that and realise it's the track changing, not the car.
Well, is that something that people in Formula One, for all their wealth of technology and experience, sometimes actually fail to recognise?
It's perhaps, yes. I think in the one way it's wrong certainly to belittle the technology in karts, and the same way it's wrong to raise it too high.
And I mean, to follow on from that, I mean, Formula One is extremely high-tech, so much so that we're seeing regulations introduced for next year to actually go backwards, which is not what normally Formula One is about. It's always about going forward. But has Formula One, to some extent, then, lost sight of its objectives with this technology?
It's a difficult question. As an engineer, obviously, I love to play around with the gizmos and this, that, and the other. It's a great toy. On the other hand, the paying spectator wants close racing and a full field, and at the moment, I'm afraid, the two are mutually contradictory.
Well, this man, Alain Prost, has got the technology and he's got the team to back it up. And currently he is quickest in this 30-minute session. And really we're some 4 minutes away to it ending. And really just all it is doing, I feel, is building even further Prost's confidence for the start at 2 o'clock here.
Damon Hill is second fastest. He's only 0.2 of a second behind Alain Prost. Then it's Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna, separated by 0.3 of a second. Jean Alesi and Riccardo Patrese. Good performances by Rubens Barrichello. Moves up to 9th on a 1:25.062. JJ Leto in 10th, Herbert in 11th, Comas in 12th, Christian Fittipaldi in 17th, and Jerry Boutsen has finally found speed this weekend. John, I'm happy to say. He did say the car felt good yesterday morning, and he's in 15th position.
Yes, I think Jerry Boutsen is like a number of the more senior drivers here. They tend to be a lot more cautious and apprehensive about going out and doing one of those blinding laps. Just sort of shut your eyes and go for it. As you grow older, you tend not to do that. Now, again, on full tanks, there will be more energy in the tyre, hopefully, therefore, more grip. And that's how I would expect Thierry Boutsen to be picking up the pace.
Carl Wendlinger moves up to 4th, and that's a good performance by the Sauber team. Does he go quicker and quicker all through the weekend? And a team that's on a very steep learning curve, I think.
Robin, the Sauber, it's in its first season. It's a relatively uncomplicated car, but sometimes, again, going back to the technology, a fairly straightforward, easily set up, let's say easily driven car can, on a circuit like Montreal, be very effective.
Yes, you're right. I think they have several advantages. They're an established team already. Secondly, they had a massive amount of money made available to them by Mercedes last year, so that they were able to come to the season well prepared and well set up. And they've held that and built on it through the year. As you say, it's a simple car, but they've probably got the best out of it. And also, don't forget, they've got a very good engine.
Yes, the Ilmor V10 is probably one of the most underrated engines in Formula One. And Sauber have been using it to very good effect. But a man who's been using his Ford V8 to excellent extent this morning is Michael Schumacher, who's now splitting the two Williams Renaults. He is now currently second quickest. He's done 14 laps, and that's a fair amount of running in a 30-minute session.
I think one thing we're seeing here that's quite noticeable is that the D8 and lighter weight, less fuel on, are relatively more competitive than the high revving, high fuel consumption cars in practice.
Prost, Schumacher, Hill, Alesi, Senna. That's the top 5 at the moment here in Canada. Then it's Carl Wendlinger and JJ Leto. Evenly matched, a couple of tenths between them in 6th and 7th. Riccardo Patrese down to 8th. Martin Brundle down in 9th and Barrichello in 10th. But it's all very close. A lot of people into the 124, 125 second bracket. So hopefully it's going to be a good race. And also, oh, Johnny.
Well, Johnny Herbert just proving a lot of spins as prettily as a Tyrrell. In fact, I think you would give Johnny slightly higher marks for content there. He got it onto the grass, but pointing in the right way, and most importantly, kept the engine running. Well, John Alesi and his Ferrari, well, that very familiar high hand on the steering wheel. I tried driving our rent car into the circuit this morning, holding the steering wheel in a similar position. I don't know how he drives the thing at all.
Herbert, whoops, putting a wheel on the grass. That's not very neat, Johnny. Prost and Schumacher are very closely matched, and interestingly, Michael Schumacher is a little bit quicker than Damon Hill, so if Michael could get ahead of Damon, well, we might even have a race on our hands, John.
I think what will be interesting is that, let's say Schumacher can split the two Williams on the first lap. For sure, Michael Schumacher will push Alain Prost harder than Alain will probably want to drive in the early laps. Remember, in these early laps, the car's carrying their maximum fuel capacity, whether it's in litres or in weight, as Ken Tyrrell told us in Monaco. It's the same thing anyway, but Ken just split the difference. And I know that Alain Prost is one of the most gentle drivers with his equipment. In fact, comparing Prost to Mansell last year, The engineers at Williams say that Prost is probably 100% easier on the equipment than Nigel Mansell was in 1992.
Alain Prost is the fastest man this morning. Michael Schumacher is second. Damon Hill, Jean Alesi and Ayrton Senna. The top 5 at the end of this half-hour warm-up. Carl Wendlinger, JJ Leto in 6th and 7th. Riccardo Patrese, Martin Brundle and Rubens Barrichello complete the top 10. Then it's Johnny Herbert and Eric Comas. Or Philippe Elio, only a couple of hundredths of a second behind his teammates Gerhard Berger and Mark Blundell complete the top 15. We'll be back in a couple of hours for the Grand Prix. Thank you for watching. See you then. Bye-bye.
The Formula One World Championship was brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. In association with Champion, Pioneer, Hitachi, Elf Petrol World Champion, and Goodyear.